Tonight the mitzvah, the chiyuv of Shna'yim Mikra Targum, since we're holding near the very beginning of Kriyas Torah. We passed Parshas Bereishis, but there was no shir last week, so we'll take the advantage this week, take the opportunity, I should say, this week to discuss it. And it's a mitzvah which reading from what the poskim talk about, it needs chizuk. Many poskim, when you read some of the tshuvas of more contemporary poskim, tshuvas and letters, etc., where they express surprise, and then they try to proceed to explain how it's a vital mitzvah and a chiyuv, not just a mitzvah in terms of a mitzvah kiyumas, but it's a chiyuv on each and every one. And as Rav Moshe writes, Rav Moshe has a letter which is printed in the beginning of a kuntres called Ve'ela Shmos, which is chizuk for the mitzvah of Shna'yim Mikra Targum, and subsequently there was that letter, or most of that haskama, or that letter was then printed in Orach Chaim Chelik Hey Orach Chaim Avikus Moshe Siman Yud Zayin, where Rav Moshe explains that the chiyuv of Shna'yim Mikra Targum is on everybody. And he goes so far as to say even people that are Torasam Umnasam, that they don't have to be mafsik for tefillah and for certain other things, but this they have to do. This itself is a chelik of limud Torah, and they can't say that they're pater because they're osek in other parts. And even if they're learning Talmud Bavli, which the Gemara says it's bowl, it contains Mikra and Mishnah and Gemara. He says, but even so, it doesn't pater them. You take a look at Rav Moshe's Tshuva. He says it does not pater anybody at all. And of course, we don't have to come on to that to be mechayev us by saying, oh, but Tarasim Nas is chayev, I guess then I got to do it also. We don't need to go that far, as Rav Moshe points out in the Tshuva, where most of us are holding a step or two behind that lofty madrega. So it's definitely an absolute chiyuv on each and every one of us to be lomeid the parsha every single week, or as the Gemara says, lahashlim parshiosav imat tzibur Shna'yim Mikra Targum. And the idea, or part of the idea, is to be familiar with Mikra, to be familiar with the Torah. As much as we spend the majority of our learning time on Torah Shabbal Peh, primarily Talmud Bavli, most of us at least, but at the same time, the Mikra, especially the Chamisha Torah, is the absolute foundation for it all, and it was the Ratzon of Chazal and the understanding of Chazal that it's critical that we be very familiar with it, we be as knowledgeable as we possibly can in the Mikros, in all the Mikros of the Torah, and so the idea really is to get as solid a foundation, as solid an understanding as you can. Now there are many ways to do the mitzvah. We'll talk about it, and there are ways of simply being yotzi, and there are ways, of course, of making the mitzvah, broadening the mitzvah, and getting more out of it. And of course, the most the person can get out of it, the more he can get out of it, he should, because the goal ultimately is to know the Mikra and to understand it. And as I think we mentioned this in the past, but the Bali Musar all talk about the idea that when a person learns Chumash, every year we go through the parashios, he's supposed to endeavor not to just chazer over what his Mora taught him in Gan about, places about Avram Avinu and the Malachim and about the Avos and the Emos. He shouldn't have those same pictures that he came home with, when he was 6 or 7, or the way the Mora or the Rebbe planted his head, and that was good for a child of that age. And then but as we get older and as continue to get older and hopefully more mature and more knowledgeable, our appreciation and our understanding, our depth in Mikra should increase as well, and we should each year endeavor to get a little bit further, a bit deeper. I find myself that sometimes there are pasha psukim, actual psukim that I read the pasuk and I say, did I see that pasuk before? And of course, it's just like, how did I ever explain the pasuk? Okay, we know there are parshios of the psukim are difficult to translate. Pasha Azinu, a lot of psukim are difficult to translate even in the etc. But besides that, sometimes within the parshios that we basically know, but there are psukim here and there, or parts of psukim which say like, what does that really mean? And how I think we become complacent to sort of gloss over it because we hear it every year, and we go through it every year, and especially if we do Shna'yim Mikra Targum in a more cursory fashion, so then it becomes, it could have, to a certain extent, it could have an opposite effect, that we become more and more just complacent with just saying, I know the pasuk, I read the pasuk many times, I know the Vayter. But the idea is to try not to do that, and to try to get as deep an understanding as we possibly can. And we'll mention that the Gemara said, the Gemara Brachos Daf Ches says, the famous Gemara that says that one should call after it says Amar Ravuna Bar Yehuda Amar Ravami Li'olam Yashlam Adam Parshiyos V'Tziba Shna'yim Mikra Targum, etc. It says Shekol Amashlam Parshiyos V'Tziba Marichin Lo Yama V'Shnosa. That there's a haftacha from Chazal there that it will bring a person. It'll reward a person with Arichas Yamim Mashanim, which is one of the shuvas. The answer I saw in one place. I saw this was in a letter from Rabbi Yamin Zilber. It's all in that same Kuntres of Elishmos, where he references. He says if somebody would tie it, well, I could be doing so much more. I could Targum, but I could. I could be spending my time in learning, in other things, and getting deeper into a sugya and Torah Shabbat Pen and Rishonim, etc. He says, well, there's a ma'aseh with the Chassam Sofer where somebody asked the Chassam Sofer why he spends so long in davening. Why he said, why Shemona Esrei takes so long? And the person said, boy, in the time that you're davening Shemona Esrei, I can learn L'chais, I can go through a Rashba, or whatever exactly he said. So the Chassam Sofer's response was that the person says that a person who is marich b'tfilosov is also rewarded with arichas yamim. So he says, I'll spend my time in davening which I feel I should and I need to, and I gain from it, and I'm not worried about the time spending on the Rashba because the Kadosh Baruch Hu will give me the time. I'll have the time for the Rashba too. So that's where Ben Yamin says. If anything, if at very least take that. So if you're worried about the Zman, I don't really want to use the word, but you're worried about the Zman you're spending on when you feel you could be spent more productively. God's Baruch Hu says, I'll give you the time. You won't be losing any time doing it. Okay, so now, so let's get to the details of the mitzvah, how to do the mitzvah. First of all, what does it mean imat sibor? When is the right time? Meaning, it's not sufficient to say, you know what, I have off from work this week, or whatever it may be. So let me get ahead a couple of parashiyos. I'll move ahead in this way because I know I tend to fall behind. I find it challenging to keep up every week. Daf Yomi, you can do that. If you're learning Daf Yomi or something else with the schedule, if it'll be productive for you to get a little bit ahead, and this way you have a little bit of a buffer. But it doesn't work that way with Shna'yim Mikra Targum because it's supposed to be imat sibur. So, which means that he's supposed to be doing it the week that the sibur is doing it. L'Rabos, I would say that even if there's a week when the upcoming Shabbos, they're not going to be laying the parasha. For example, Shabbos is going to be Yom Tif, or it's going to be Chol HaMoed, and they're not going to be laying the parasha. So then the weekdays before that is not the proper time for that next parasha. Which is going to say according to many, and even a Shaila B'di'evet, that imat sibur means lav dafka when they started laying it at the mincha before, lav dafka when they started laying it at mincha, which of course they've done. If next Shabbos is Shabbos Yom Tov or Shabbos Chol HaMoed, so obviously on this Shabbos at mincha we're laying whatever the parasha is going to be, but whatever the next parasha is going to be. But poskim say that is still, that week is not called imat sibur. Imat sibur means when you're past a Shabbos, there's no Shabbos coming up in between when they're going to be laying something else. And Rabbi Yashiv in the Sefer Aris, the Brachos goes so far as to say even b'di'evet, if a person did it the week before, he should, and then this comes to his attention, he should do the parasha over again during that week. Once it's past that Shabbos, then he says he doesn't have to. We'll see, you could theoretically make up the parasha even past the Shabbos, but then he says that you don't have to. Once it's past the Shabbos already, then you can be somewhere, b'di'evet you did it before. But l'chatchila, if it's before that Shabbos and you did it the previous week, that wouldn't work. So we covered. We addressed it. Okay. So when is the starting? What is that? Okay. So when is the starting point? Though, on an average, in most of the weeks of the year, when it is every Shabbos is a parasha. So according to the Mishnah, you can start already on Shabbos by Mincha. And by the same token, that is the end of the previous parsha. Now, so let's get a little bit more specific. Lechatchila, you should. It's the preferred way is to finish any week's parsha before the Su'udah, before the Sudas Hayom, before you sit down to the day meal of Shabbos. You should preferably finish the parsha, the previous parsha. But that's more begin the mitzvah than a muvchar. The real zman, the lechatchila zman to end is by mincha. Now, what does mincha mean? Does that mean zman mincha, with the zman that you could have mincha? And if it does that mean mincha gedola? We know there's two zman. There's mincha gedola, which is half hour after chatzos, and there's mincha ketana, which is 9.5 hours. Or does it mean when you actually daven mincha? So this is an issue which is not so clearly addressed in many sources. If you look at the Mishnah, it's not. It's not really clearly addressed. There is an indication in the Mishnah Berurah that it's at least not mincha gedola. Based on what he says about chatzos, there is an indication at least that it's not mincha gedola. But let's put it this way: there are poskim to rely on certainly that until you daven mincha that day, you could still be doing the parsha from the previous week. Once you've daven mincha and you've already attended a minyan where they've lain the following parsha, so then by then you should lechatchila be finished. But the evidence, if a person is not finished, so then there are a few madregas. If you could finish it at least on Shabbos, before Shabbos is over, that would still be a maila. If not, the next level really is until Tuesday, because we know the first 3 days of the week, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, are Mesiaches to the previous Shabbos. So if you finish the parsha by Tuesday, before dark on Tuesday, you've accomplished, you've at least achieved one level. It's but it's one level. Should give him a second. And the next after that, the next level is Simchas Torah. Now, not that you should wait for them, because this happened more than once. I've heard of people who are coming up to Simchas Torah, and they say, I know I missed this parsha. I know I missed 3 parshas. I'm not exactly sure if it was this one or it was this one. In the end of my Mikra, I fell behind a little bit, and now they don't know. And it's within this circle. Somebody asked me this year, a circle of I think 6 parshas, and he missed 3. So do I have to do all of them? And that's what tends to happen. If unless the person's like great at record keeping, it tends to happen that if you don't. If you push it off, then especially if it's not the only one, by the time Simchas Torah comes around, it becomes a little bit fuzzy, and then you don't know. And either you may just say, "Oh, forget it, it's just too overwhelming," or whatever. Maybe you just may end up doing extra parshas. So it really doesn't pay to push it off to then either. It pays to do it right away, but at the same token, not at the expense of the next parsha. Which means if you're going to, let's say this is Shabbos Noah. So let's say you find yourself behind the Noah, and you're making up next week, and by a result of making it up, you end up falling behind the Lech Lecha. You don't start Lech Lecha on time, and you can't finish Lech Lecha by Lechatchila Zman, and you're always playing catch up. Then that's not the right thing to do. Avada, you should once you pass Tuesday night, don't allow making up last week's parsha to interfere with doing this week's parsha lechatchila. It's not; they don't have to be in order. And what I'm trying to bring out is adrabah. To be in order but constantly behind is no feat. That's not what we try. Better to be a month behind on one parsha or whatever it may be, and finish the other parshas on time.
The Rabbi was mentioning about the lechatchila's man for finishing. What about starting the next week?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll get back to that in a second. So. So I mentioned, so for starting, you could start by Zman Mincha. That's the psak of the Mishnah Berurah. There are others that are mefakbek in that, but everyone agrees that by Motzai Shabbos, once it's past Shabbos, and you could definitely start.
So which Zman Mincha?
I'm sorry?
So which Zman Mincha was the...
Oh, so it would be, it seems it would be the same. Whatever is the cutoff point, for one, like I said, it's not clearly defined, but there's, what I would think would be the best thing would be if you actually daven mincha, to wait till you actually daven mincha, and then begin.
That was mincha, even if you daven mincha gedola.
Yeah, even daven mincha gedola. But if you daven mincha already, you could do that. Now I mentioned that if there, even those who are mafakbek on the Mishnah Berurah's psak and say it has to be the actual week, so that would begin that night, Motzai Shabbos. There is a lechatchila in not to learn Mikra at night, and to limit to learn Torah Shabbal Peh at night and learn Torah B'Ksav during the day, with the exception of Friday night when it's Chatchila to learn. Shna'yim Mikra Targum, Friday night is definitely Chatchila, and some say even Thursday night. Other than that, it's the more Lechatchila, if one is able to schedule himself in ideal fashion, he would learn the Mikra during the day and Torah Shabbat at night. But that notwithstanding, the Zman definitely at night is already the Zman, and again, one should not allow that to interfere with actually learning the parasha within the right times.
So we know it like that at all today. This idea of not learning at night.
Yes, it is a lechela. You take a look at the Shartzi. I'm sure the Shartzi brings it down in Hilchos Marav. I think it is very Shalom Chesed, I believe. He brings it down, and we're knowing it as a preference, not as a ma'akev, and not as something that should, as I said, would take priority over finishing the parsha in time. If you know that, well, my only time is I have every night I can do it from 9 to 9:30, and I'll get it done. Otherwise, it's hit or miss. So do it from 9 to 9:30. But if you can, juggle your schedule in a way that you'll do it during the day, it's a preference.
The only thing you're saying very simply, if you think about it, is that the culture of
Well, you're still learning the Shna'yim Mikra. It's still Shna'yim Mikra, which is so I don't think that makes it learning Mikra. Okay, so we got the starting point. Now, some people divide it up. They do a section every day, either by aliyahs, even though there are those that say, I think the Hashukhan says that the aliyahs don't really have any standing in terms of halacha. Nonetheless, there are those that will divide it up that way. Otherwise, some people divide it up. There is where there's a parsha psucha, a stuma, where there's a peir samach in the Chumash, which works a lot of times. It doesn't always work with some parashas. Like in Balak, for example, there's no peir samach until the last few psukim about Vayeshev Yisrael B'Shitim, the whole otherwise stuff. So that's not going to work if you're breaking it up. There are parashas even long before Balak. I think Vayetze also. I think there's long sections where there's no peir samach, so it doesn't always work that way. But but nonetheless, however, there is this concept of breaking it up by day, and there were the Chazon Ish, interestingly held. He used to do it throughout the week, but he saved Shvi'i till after they laned, till after the shul laned. He held that Imat Sibur means, apparently, I never saw this really explained, but I saw it brought down that he held Imat Sibur apparently meant not to finish before the Tzibur. That you only after the Tzibur finishes, then you finish. So then you could. Not that you can't start before, but you should complete the parsha after the Kriyas HaTorah. So that's what this brought. He used to save Shvi till after the Kriyas HaTorah. Now, we'll see right away. We're going to talk maybe the next thing about how exactly to do it. But one possibility, and some people find this as a way of, let's say, saving time, that they'll lane along with the Balkareh as he's laying the parsha and be Yotze one time Mikra with that. Now that's okay. Just simply listening would not count, but if you are articulate, you lane along the psukim as he's laning, so that would count as a Mikra. Okay, but so that bridges us into how exactly you're supposed to do it. So it's Shna'yim Mikra Becha Targum. There are various reasons why they were established it that way. Maybe we'll see it then if we have time, but that is supposed to be Shna'yim Mikra Becha Targum. We have to define also what Targum means, but meanwhile Shna'yim Mikra Becha Targum. So there's no question that Mikra, at least one time Mikra has to precede the Targum. I mean, you can't do whatever you're doing for Targum. You can't just do the Targum and then do the two Mikras. According to the Mishnah Berurah, lechatchila both Mikras should precede the Targum. According to the Mishnah Berurah, it should be that order: Shna'yim Mikra and then Echad Targum. And now it could be done pasuk by pasuk, 2 times Mikra Targum, 2 times Mikra Targum, or it could be done by Pei and Samuch or by Ali, whatever it is. But the point is, in any given pasuk, according to the Mishnah Berurah, lechatchila, you should do both times Mikra before one Targum. B'di'evet, Mishnah Berurah learns that you're Yotze if you do Mikra, Targum, Mikra. Notice that the Targum is in between. If you do Targum and then 2 Mikra, you're not Yotze. That's not good even B'di'evet. The Targum, as I said, the one time Mikra has to precede the Targum, which makes sense because the idea is to learn the Mikra and then the Targum as an interpretation, explanation of the Mikra, so you understand it. So it makes sense that first you say, okay, this is what I need to understand. Then I go about understanding it rather than reading the the explanation first and then see the psukim. So in any case, but that's what the Mishnah says. So one time Targum before both mikras would not be good. There are other achronim who hold that it's mamash lechatchila to do it Mikra, Targum, Mikra, because they hold that the understanding is that as the Targum, you've done the Mikra, now see what it means. Now you see what it means. Now okay, now go over it again. Now that we've explained it, okay. So here, now try it again, read it again, and hopefully you'll have a better understanding, a better appreciation for the Mikra. So there are those achronim hold that that's mamash lechatchila. So he said the Mishra is not lechatchila, but he is masking that you're yotzei, at least for the evidence. So when I say that some people will be yotzei one time Mikra with the Kriyas Hatzibor, so if you want to do it like the Mishnah Berurah lechatchila, that means you're still going to have to do the entire Targum afterwards, and even like the other achronim that it could be you could have done you could have done already Mikra Targum and you yotzi your second Mikra with that, but as
that's considered the evidence?
feed the Mishnah Berurah. Feed the Mishnah Berurah unless you do the Targum afterwards. Feed the Mishnah Berurah, it's lechatchila, the Targum has to follow both times of Mikra. So if you're using the Kriyas HaTorah laning along as one time Mikra, then you would have to first do the Targum after that.
But you are yotzei, so you learn an Aliyah day with the Targum, and then you just read along with.
Yes, even with the you are yotzei that way. Yes.
What about balancing it with the finishing it by the Suda, finishing it by, meaning if you do it that way, so you're b'diavad l'gabedah, but then you're l'chatchila to finish it by the Suda. So,
in other words, if you're saying that in order to finish by the Suda, you would want to do Mikra Targum already, and then be yotzei the second Mikra with that, and then you go home and eat with a clear conscience. Whereas if you're going to wait to do the Targum afterwards, you're very likely or very possibly not going to have a chance to do it for the Suda.
right.
So I would say if that's then they say there are other achronim who hold it's mamash lechatchila that way, and even the Mishnah Berurah is masking yotzei that way. So that would be the best way to do it, because once you don't, part of the idea of doing it by the Suda, something down, is because if you don't, since the Suda could tend to drag on a little bit, and we eat a little bit more on Shabbos, and it might end up throwing you off, and you might not get to it by Mincha, especially as the winter's approaching and the days get shorter. And it's it's a realistic possibility, and especially if after the Suda the person feels I can't do anything now till I put my head down because now my head is swimming, so I gotta rest first. So it's very, very possible that he won't get it done. So then there would be merit to do it that way. And be samech on these shittas we mentioned.
Did you mix, like you do part of the Mikra, and then the Mikra with the tzibur with Baal Peri, and then finish your first time after that?
And where did finish first time and then do the Targum?
So you do Mikra with Targum, but you don't finish the parsha.
Yeah. Okay.
Then when you get with the Baal Peri, you do the whole thing once, and then you finish.
Yes, and then Mikra Targum, let's see, you did up to Rabbi by yourself, and then you do the Rabbi to the end with the Baal Peri,
Not
and then
to the end, but you do the whole thing again. The second time, the whole thing.
the second. So for part of it's the second time, part of it's the first time.
Right.
I don't think it makes a difference. I think that's
Wasn't the Chazon Ish knowing himself Mikra Targum?
Yes, he was. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Now, so we said eventually it could be done. It could be done possibly. If it could be done section by section. But the ikar is that it be done just within the guidelines that we mentioned. The one of the central questions is to say what is Targum? We know what Mikra is. We have no question whatsoever about what Mikra is. But what is Targum? So the literal taich of Targum, perhaps let's say the first level of Chatchila would be the Onkelos. We know that there's a very great chashivas to Perish Onkelos. It was Nitan the Sinai, and it's considered to be something of extremely high stature and a big ma'ila to do Onkelos. Now, at the same time, one might say, well, I don't really understand a lot of the Onkelos. Whenever the Onkelos is doing more than just using Hebrew-sounding words to translate the Hebrew, and he's using words that are more advanced Aramaic, I don't know anyway what they mean, other than by looking back at the Mikra maybe, or whatever it is, which is a little bit counterintuitive. So that's a question. There are those that want to say that if you don't understand the Targum, then you're the Onkelos, then you're actually not Yotzei. There is a letter. I don't believe the Chavetz Chaim addresses as the Mishnah Berurah directly, but there's a Mikra from the Chavetz Chaim where he seems to say this that you need to understand. If you're doing Onkelos, you need to understand it. Now, there are ways to do that now. At the same time, I want to underscore the importance of doing Onkelos. I think it's very, very. I mean, it is broad that it's very, very chashiv and basic to do the Onkelos. So there are two choices. If you don't want to simply be Yotzei Onkelos because by just reading it and not knowing it, it's where some say you're not really Yotzei that way. So one choice is that now there are Svarim that explain Onkelos. There are besides that there are entire Beurim, Svarim that go into depth in Onkelos, but there are basic Svarim that will basically translate for you the Onkelos and give you an appreciation of the Onkelos, so you could learn the Psukim with the Onkelos and then see and use one of those Svarim to figure out whatever you're missing in the Onkelos they would fill in.
There are times where I'm not sure if I understand Onkelos or not, because I usually assume that's what the pasuk is saying, unless I don't even know if I understand or not. Because is this exactly what the pasuk is saying, or is it not? So because I understand the Mikra, and therefore I assume that's what Onkelos is saying usually. But I don't know. And there's times where I don't know if I'm understanding or not. So
all right. So again, so you're saying you basically understand. You're using the Mikra to translate the Onkelos rather than the other way.
Unless I know otherwise, I assume that's what the Mikra is saying.
Right.
I'm supposed to assume I don't understand what it's saying and go through the Pirush on Onkelos for every pasuk.
Well, I think it would be be worthwhile if the Onkelos is using words that you're really not familiar with, so then it probably would be worthwhile, at least on psukim like that, to look into a sefer that explains the Onkelos. Worthwhile is it to say it's absolutely market, I'm not necessarily saying, but definitely worthwhile to do that. But at the same time, again, since I do think it's valuable that a person try to do the Onkelos, and even if he doesn't feel at any given point that he's getting a tremendous amount out of it, but that improves with time, and it improves with as you become more as you learn more Masechtas and Shas, you become more familiar with more terms, and Memela, it helps you understand them, because the Gemara you're learning the Gemara, you're gonna get the Taich of the Gemara, so you that helps you understand the Onkelos as well. But especially people that are perhaps more newcomers to learning, or and they struggling with the Aramaic, it's still kedai to do the Onkelos, I feel, and I think they're more in a position to see the growth, to see as they're learning improves and increases, that their appreciation for Onkelos will as well. But another possibility is, even if let's say you can't take a sefer, you want to do Onkelos, but you don't have a sefer that translates it, or you find that it's becoming that's too difficult. So the other possibility is not relying on the Onkelos alone as the Targum. Now the Shulchan Aruch already says, the Mechaber already says, that a Yirei Shamayim should learn Perish Rashi as well. The reason to learn Perish Rashi as part of the mitzvah Shna'yim Mikra Targum is the idea is that Rashi will expound a lot more on the Psukim and give us, even if you do understand Onkelos, but the Rashi will go into a lot more depth and a lot more detail of Perish. On the other hand, Rashi of course doesn't go in every pasuk, so you couldn't just do Rashi. You'd have to, if you're only doing Rashi, you'd have to minimally learn the pasuk itself 3 times. But the best thing would be to be doing something else in conjunction with Rashi. And Shulchan Aruch recommends doing Rashi, as Reish trying to do Rashi in addition to Onkelos. So now Rashi, so that would be great if a person could find the time for this to learn the Rashi. And the Rashi, of course, the biggest benefit, the greatest feedback, or a payoff, I should say, of doing Rashi would be doing it in the original, doing it the way, learning the words of Rashi, and then using a translation or an explanation if you feel you need. But Rashi could be done in other languages as well. By Rashi, it's not the way Onkelos, it's the words itself. Meaning, to take a translation of Onkelos, to just do Shna'yim Mikra and one time the translation of Onkelos, that would not be the same. But to do Shna'yim Mikra and to do it with the translation of Rashi, you would probably have the benefit of Rashi, assuming it's an authentic, reliable translation of Rashi. Because by Rashi, it's not dafka the words as much as it is by Yonkelis. It's what Rashi is. It's what Rashi's saying rather than necessarily the words. But again, not chashav. We know that even every vav in Rashi and every letter in Rashi is chashav and halig and etc. Not in any way diminishing the value of that. But again, for a person who reading let's say a person who is just not familiar with the Rashi and Rashi he's not going to get anything out of that. And to do the Rashi and the translation, he finds it just going through the verbiage of saying every Rashi and then having to first see what it means, it just gets overwhelming and it's just not good. So then, even if he didn't do that, even if he didn't say out the Rashis, but just learned the Psukim with a peirush with an explanation of Rashi or a translation of Rashi from a reliable source, would also be appropriate.
Rashi oftentimes does Shudo and then says the Darsh of Zal, which Rashi seems to the Shul Mashma that he's not saying is the Pashat Pshad. I mean, it's all Darshan. It's a Jewish a lot of times. Is that necessary for Shna'yim then, or is that just because who's that smart?
Would you be Yotze if you learn Rashi like most? You would. I mean, you would. It's it's low gora than some of the other things we'll talk about in a minute, type of thing. But but sometimes you're doing Rashi, you could. I don't think it's often enough that it would make the difference.
Sometimes Rashi is like two shots like
right.
Some of the very hard Rashi does.
Right, yes. But it's good training because he does that in Sugis and Gemaras too also. And
those are really hard.
Right. Especially when you finally broke through and then he says, Lashon Acher Shamati V'hu Ha'ikar. Oh no. Yeah, I know it's right, especially next to here it happens a lot, right? Rashi he goes through something and then he turns around and sometimes it's not the Ikar, but so it's good practice. Yeah.
You could go to it without Onkelos and just on Rashi?
Yes, you could. If you do, yes, you could, as long as you do something for the Psukim that don't have Rashi.
Right, you have to reread it.
At least read the pasuk a third time or do something else.
That's often different.
It depends. There are all sorts of levels. I wouldn't call it b'diavad. It's not the first choice. The first choice is make sure you get Onkelos done. That's the first choice, and then so I wouldn't call it the first choice, but it's hard to call it a b'diavad. Psukim with the Rashi with the
So when the Rabbi is saying to do one of the explanations or translations of Rashi, or the Rabbi is saying to say those words out loud?
Yes.
To say it in English.
Okay, when we're talking about Targum, we're talking about articulating. Whatever you're doing, you should be articulated. If you're doing the Onkelos, you articulate it with the Shemos, etc. So let me just say one more to closing lines. That's the time, and I'm not going to go back to this next week. So I just wanted to say that if a person needs to, and the only thing he feels he can do it with, or he gets the most out of, and it's the most practical, is even an English translation. As long as it's an English translation which is al pi Chazal and done, by reliable sources, done al pi Chazal. I don't. We haven't getting specifics right now, but then that would also suffice. That could be considered Targum. It's not the most lechatchila, but it could be done that way. And if that's going to make the difference, that's going to give the person a sipuk in the mitzvah, so he's going to really stick with it. Then he could do that. One thing, I hope we didn't get to all many halachas, but I think we did the basic ones. And I do want you to walk away with I'm not assuming that there's anybody here who doesn't do it faithfully and religiously, but in the event that you speak to someone who doesn't, so I really hope that that this message gets across, that it's something very, very important to do, and it's, as I said, it's a chiyuv. It's not merely a nice thing. It has many strong benefits to it, matan schar b'sido, marich layom v'shnos, etc. Besides the fact that you become familiar with the Gadosh Baruch Hu's Torah, which sure could be better than that. But it's a chiyuv. It's a chiyuv in Shulchan Aruch, like the way some write. It's like, why migara mishar mitzvahs d'Rabbanan? Why does it have such a difficult lot? And so that much. So therefore, if I say when I'm saying if the only way, if a person feels at least at this stage in his life, the way it's going to get done is if he does it with not with Onkelos and not with Rashi, but with a reliable, well-founded, well-based English translation, then he'd be Yossi the mitzvah with that as well. Say it, but don't just read it with your eyes. Read out the psukim and read that translation, and then Mitzvah Shem will move on to maybe the next year, or whatever, so move on to something else. Okay, just to mention, hope next week a plan, Bez Hashem, is to start a series of shiurim on halachas and mezuzah. A lot of different halachas and mezuzah, and I hope to begin that next Tuesday, Bez Hashem.
The Rabbi didn't speak of like how many psukim you should do at one time or things like that, or
No, so I'm saying it's up to you. You could do pasuk by pasuk.
so there's no problem of stopping wherever you have to stop. Or,
No, it should.